Good morning, friends. Nice to see you, wherever you are, however you are, whoever you think you are. Here we are. Here we are. Here we are in the midst of the turning world, in the midst of whatever one's personal narrative is. You might just think for a moment, what's your personal narrative at the moment? No, the currents of situation that might be going on relationally, and health-wise, and just like, what's the stuff of body, mind, heart, history, circumstance? Because we tend to be very wrapped up in that stuff. The ahankara, the Buddha talks about, the I-making activity, selfing, me and my. And just that capacity, we sit down together a little bit, beginning of the morning, just to, here we are, like here is awareness in the midst of the turning world. Here's awareness, right? In the midst of, here's my personal narrative and circumstance, okay. And then, what else we're in the midst of? You're just in the midst of sensory immediacy. Sounds, sights. And so as we recognize these different things, it's like we're letting ourselves actually come to the center, letting our attention settle and be really where we are, in the center of the turning world, the center of this sensory life, in the center of this organic perception, in the center of my feeling life, mind states, in the center of the personal narrative, in the center also of abstraction. Just to be in the center where abstractions swirl around. Abstractions, of course, means what we think we know about other times, other places. Abstractions. And all these things are important. Our sensory life is important. Our personal circumstance are important. The abstract world, right, that which we know about, is important. But in a way, we make it not important enough and too important at the same time. We make it too important by just giving a lot of thought energy to all of that stuff, but without wisdom. And we make it not important enough, right? Because we tend not to just actually come into and investigate our relationship to all of that. So, how's your relationship with sensory immediacy? And we don't find that out by thinking about it. We come by, let me come into it and see. Come into it and hear. Come into it and feel. How's my relationship to personal circumstance? Do I have a sort of background narrative that's sort of complaining? No. This isn't alright, it's not fair, or why me? Or do I have a background narrative that's sort of lost in fetishizing or romanticizing or nostalgizing the past? Or that's lost in regretting and replaying and maybe blaming myself or blaming someone else for the past? Or do I just get caught up in that personal narrative in what's next, in where I'm going, what I'm looking forward to, what I'm hoping for, or equally what I'm worrying about, what I'm afraid of, what I'm anxious over? These are the habitual ways that we inhabit our personal narrative. But our practice, and certainly meditation practice most especially, invites us, let me come into a wise relationship, a centered relationship, an open relationship, a gentle relationship with all of that. And then what's our relationship to abstraction? When you read about the craziness of the world, the political situation, Venezuela, Ukraine, Greenland, these are just the latest poppings up of alarm, right? Of course, there's still they're maybe the three that are taking up the space in the collective narrative and the abstract narrative at the moment. We go back a few weeks, and it would have been more Gaza and Israel. It's not that difficult situation has disappeared in Gaza and Israel, just the news attention has moved on, just like our own attention moves from place to place, and then we tend to fixate where our attention has moved. And of course, while the narrative, the news narrative, the media narrative was focused on Israel and Gaza, there was also terrible things happening in Sudan particularly, which is actually very near, right? Israel pop across the Negev to Egypt and go a little bit south, and one's in Sudan. You're almost neighbouring Israel, where war and violence and loss of life is happening on a huge scale, a greater scale than in Israel and Gaza. And yet somehow, but the narrative spotlight doesn't fall there. So I'm not trying to bring out a whole geopolitical thing, but it's very interesting to see how much does my own attention get pulled and pushed around by the media attention? How much does my own inner narrative get conditioned by the politicized narrative, the media narrative? And of course, that also depends on which narrative we go towards, which newspapers we read, which things the algorithm feeds us. It's interesting that, you go back 10 years or 20 years and we always used to sit down in front of, the same kind of news show at 9 o'clock or whatever. And there was a much more consensus narrative, and now we're all each in our own worlds, and what we think we know is has been curated for us often through our own little social media feeds or whatever. And our neighbour or our family member, has maybe got a very, very different sense of what's going on. Not because we're each thinking in some kind of deep and reflective way to come up with our own deepest sense of what accords with my values, etc. No, but because we've each been fed a particular slice, particularly curated slant. So whether that's happening out there in the news or whether it's happening in here, it's the same thing. What's my relationship to my personal narrative? The stories I tell myself about myself. The stories I tell myself about those around me, about my relationships, about my work, about my position in the world. And how do I inhabit the kind of more widespread narrative, political narrative, can be also a sort of philosophical narrative. The meaning of life, or what constitutes a good life, or what's important, what's moral, what's good, what's right. Now, sometimes we don't necessarily think very much about what's right and what's good, and yet, we all have some kind of values system. And maybe, you good-hearted people, you maybe think about your values and what's right, and with real depth and care. And yet, the invitation in a way when I say, oh, let's just come to the centre of all of that. On the one hand, it means to really inhabit the sensory life, the personal narrative, the abstractions, etc. On the other hand, it's also to just let them be. Let all of that be like flecks of dust dancing in the sunlight of awareness. So there's this way, comes back to the mandala we were exploring yesterday, right? There's this about fine attention and vast awareness. There's a way in which we can be really in the centre of experience, yet also unbound by it, uncompelled by it. That theme we had for this week, love and let go, right? Be in the centre of and yet independent from, right? Be in a loving relationship with what we're noticing and yet also loose. Loving and letting go. Being close to, but holding it all lightly, loosely, lovingly. Freely, freely. To inhabit this moment freely. That's the invitation. That's the promise. That's the real possibility of our practice. That's why we show up here in the morning. To inhabit this moment freely. And to train together in the art of inhabiting this moment freely. So, wiggle your butt a little. Feel your seat. Lift your spine. Open your chest. Take a deep breath. Soften your belly. And take your seat. It's like this that we practice together. You might imagine that your belly is the centre of the mandala, the centre of the earth, the centre of gravity. Such that in a quite natural way, all your attention that tends to stray here and there can be gently drawn towards the centre. That your attention really enters into and fills this field of immediate experience, this field of bodily life, this deep, soft, breathing belly. Just let this be your whole practice, these next minutes. Just letting your attention gather and settle. Letting body be relaxed and at ease. Letting breath flow naturally and freely. Letting thoughts and abstractions and sounds and sensations, letting them all just pass by freely. Letting them be like specks of dust dancing in the sunlight of awareness. While you establish a sense of presence here in the center of all experience. Just like this. the centre of all experience. Awareness. Pervading all experience. Awareness. The center of awareness, the center of all experience, a sense of center that's soft, relaxed, open, easeful, natural. And each moment that you notice you've been lost in abstraction, lost in personal narrative, lost in just any feature of experience, just stopping there for a moment, really seeing how being lost works, how it pulls your attention out of the center, pulls your attention off into some direction. And all you have to do is drop it. Let it go. Unhook your attention. In order to return to the center, or actually more precisely, you might notice, in order to see that you're already and totally here in the center of everything. Awareness in the center of everything. Awareness pervading everything. Freely, brilliantly, lovingly, peacefully. Doesn't matter what happens. Doesn't matter how much or how often your attention's pulled off here or there. Don't sweat it. No blame, no judgment, no drama. Just re-establishing and re-establishing and re-establishing these same basic liberating qualities. Presence in the center of everything. A presence that's really felt, that's bodily, that's relaxed and effortless, that's tender and welcoming. It's open and spacious. Awareness in the center of everything, right here. Awareness pervading everything, right here. right here in the center of everything. Right here, pervading and including everything. Right here, becoming everything. Oh, quite like to just carry on sitting, really. But here we are. That was meditation. Little time for questions that you might have. Anything that seems like it might be helpful to explore. I mean, anything is welcome, but maybe particularly if your questions turn around this seeming paradox of simultaneously sense of being inside or at the center of experience, while simultaneously pervading or including or being the space around all experience. And it doesn't make much sense, right, to everyday mind, but it makes perfect sense. It actually makes much more sense than our usual way of perceiving, from a kind of, from a meditative kind of vantage point. It makes perfect sense to be the essence inside everything while simultaneously being the space around everything. Somehow. All right. Before I get into questions, just a brief daily reminder about Dharma. The way that is how we can all be here. The very direct way we can all be here, me and you and George and the whole platform and everything, is because of Dharma, the engine of generosity. And the generosity that gave rise to Sangha Live in the beginning, the generosity that drives this, making teachings and practices available, the generosity of your contributions, and the mutuality of all of that. And that mutuality is really the lifeblood of this. It's the lifeblood of the Dhamma, it's the way the Buddha very consciously set that up. Let teachings and practices be shared as an act of support, of care, of generosity, of offering. And then talking about the joy of that, like the joy of giving. There's a lovely line where the Buddha says you get the joy 3 times in giving. You get joy in the anticipation of giving. Oh, I can give, I can support, I can offer, I can contribute to supporting that which I value. And then the joy in the actual act of giving, right? No, I'm supporting. And then the joy afterwards in remembering, oh, I've supported that. So that sense of it really runs through the tradition, the idea of the linking of dana and joy. Buddha talks about dana as a foundation for happiness. But of course, when we think about money, no, here's the teacher talking about wisdom and spaciousness, and now it's money. We tend to get tight, and when you get tight, that sucks the joy out, right? So, if you feel able to support Sangha Live today, even if you feel like your support is a very modest amount, please connect to the goodness, offering, supporting, contributing, giving. And please connect with the good heart of that, the good intention of that, and let it be a foundation for happiness. Let it be a joyful thing. It's beautiful, right? To support. It's beautiful to be supported. So you feel supported by teachings and practices and community here. Wonderful. Take it in. Feel the goodness and glad-heartedness in the support. And then giving support. Oh, wonderful thing. So important, actually, for Dharma to really work, actually, for it to really function. We have to connect to the heart of Dharma, in the sense of that it's love, it's joy, it's happiness, it's support, it's nourishment. And that's very different than just like, giving a donation. All right, let's see what the questions have to say this morning. And there's the link that George just put in. Thanks, George. Questions? Okay. What part of me is talking? When I hear my thoughts, it's definitely not the centre. That's silent. Where do our thoughts come from? Where do our thoughts come from? Where do sights come from? Where do sights come from? If you can answer me really clearly where sights come from, I'll do the same for where thoughts come from. Where do sounds come from? We say, the sight, the sight of that thing comes from that thing, or the sound of the bird comes from the bird. Right? But is that true? I'm not trying to speak philosophically, right, or ontologically. I'm trying to speak experientially, phenomenologically. Where do sounds come from? They just arise, don't they, in awareness? Oh. Where do sights come from? They just arise in awareness. Where do sensations come from? They just arise in awareness. So, where do thoughts come from? They appear in awareness. We say, okay, but the sound arises in awareness because there's a bird there singing. So, what makes the thought arise in awareness? Well, there's a mind there thinking. And what's the mind made of? Well, the mind's made of, habits and momentum and conditioning, just like the bird is made, right, of habits and momentum and conditioning. But the bird is made of bird nature, right? The conditions that went into that, the evolutionary conditions, the biological conditions, plus the kind of the weather conditions, all the conditions, what the bird's just eaten, all the conditions that are making that come forth. The same thought is arising out of all the conditions, the habits, the imprints, the history, the conditioning that make the thought appear in that moment. So essentially that's what's happening, right? And yet, in a way, where the thought comes from, I would say, is you can get a bit bound up with trying to figure that stuff out. More important than where the thought comes from is the fact that the thought is here, right, and how it can be met. Because actually, in how we meet thoughts, we're more likely to see something about their true nature than we are in trying to figure out where they come from. So, short answer, mind produces thoughts like birds produce birdsong, or like trees produce leaves. Like, just it's the nature of a tree to produce leaves. It's the nature of birds to sing. It's the nature of mind to think. When we see that, we've become much less contentious with our own minds. Just like we wouldn't try to stop the birds singing or stop the trees growing leaves. The tree, you just shouldn't. The same thing, we don't bother trying to stop our minds producing thoughts. Actually, we rather appreciate that they produce thoughts because it's their nature. It's what a mind is supposed to do, just like it's like what a tree is supposed to do. But just because a tree produces leaves doesn't mean you have to get in there and mess with all the leaves. Just because a mind produces thought doesn't mean you have to believe everything you think. I'm trying to track this. I think that that next bit in the comments is a response to what I just said from the same person. I can understand what you're saying, but I'm currently in what I consider to be a state of depression where I can't feel a centre. I feel lost and unable to locate a self, but at the same time I feel scared and unhappy. I don't know a way to find myself or a relationship with the world. So most important thing I would say is a lot of tenderness, right? Tenderness towards, compassion for, forgiveness of the one who's suffering. And it may be that there are other things, I don't know, I only know of your situation, this small bit that you've put in there now, right? So if I was to explore more with you, and if I was to try to direct or guide you in any fuller sense, I would want to know a lot more. So I'm reticent to say too much when I only know so little. And of course, there's causes and conditions for the depression. Those may be historical and psychological and emotional and also situational, etc. And all of that might really need some care and attention, etc. But the two things I can say with, high degree of confidence, tenderness, like cultivating tenderness towards yourself, right? Don't worry too much about locating a sense of self. You have thoughts, you have feelings. I feel scared and unhappy, right? That's a center, right? Right now, I feel scared and unhappy. Okay, so you can center there, right, with tenderness, kindness, forgiveness. Like, can I hold this fear and unhappiness in the way that I would hold, that some young, vulnerable being who was extremely dear to me. The way that I would hold an infant or hold a baby animal. Might be more accessible for some of us. Animals are easier than people for some of us. Whoever it is, right? And the way that I would want to cradle and care for this young, vulnerable life. Can I cradle and care for unhappiness and sadness in that way? And then you get to cultivate this helpful quality, kindness, tenderness, ease. And you also, that's where you establish a sense of centre. Not in any kind of platonic way, not in any kind of essential way. It's not like the centre, right? But just there is no such thing as a centre, actually, right? But nevertheless, we can have a sense of coming to the centre of this moment, right? The centre of this experience, the centre of what's happening. There's sadness and unhappiness, and I'm coming into that with kindness, tenderness, forgiveness, and letting that just soothe the system. And not easy to meet painful states. It's hard to meet our experience, really, when it's painful. But it's actually much harder not to meet it and to keep being sort of lost in the swirl of it. All right. Mark says, I'm not sure what order these questions are coming in, so forgive me if I'm not attending to them in the right order. I'm just seeing what's at the top, basically. Mark says, while meditating, a thought arises and there's a sense of self attached to it. Is it better to let the sense of self drift off with the thought, or to remain in the sense of self and let the thought fade? I don't know, Mark. I don't know. I don't try both and see. Right? The sense of self that's attached to it, though, right? There's an assumption in the question that the sense of self remains, right? So a thought arises, there's a sense of self attached to it. The idea that you can let the thought drift off and remain in the sense of self, I would say, is a bit spurious. The sense of self actually just belongs to that moment, to that thought. And then it goes, and a new thought comes, and a new sense of self attaches. But we infer a continuity to the sense of self. We think, oh, there's me, and then I'm having this thought, then I'm having that thought, then I'm having another thought. And so I can let the thoughts go, and I can sort of stay in being the one who's having the thoughts. Okay, but please do stay with that and see if it's true. Is there real continuity to the sense of self? Or is the continuity inferred? And actually, the sense of self is as ephemeral as the thought that it arises in conjunction with. All right. Can you speak to loving and letting go of fear when it is very intense? I'm emerging from a period of ill health, and I've tried to make informed decisions aligning with my values. As I've finished my treatment, I'm assailed by fear and anxiety about my decisions, and I should have done something differently. How can I can calm my nervous system for a while, very good, and then the thoughts invade again, kicking off the fear and the urge to do something about wanting the fear and anxiety to go away. Yeah, I hear that right at the top of the question, right? How can I let go of fear and anxiety when it's very intense? You absolutely cannot. So you need, one is the idea of I want to let go of fear. That's actually understandably, completely understandably, actually I want to push away, I want to get rid of, right? That's not letting go. And two, once something is very intense and overwhelming, you've lost your resources, right? So you need to cultivate the resources of presence and ease and acceptance and openness when you're not overwhelmed, when you're not overwhelmed. So it's very good that you can calm your nervous system for a while. And then what do you do? When you calm your nervous system for a while, then the thoughts invade again, kicking off the fear, right? When the thoughts invade again, then that's the moment when they first start. Turn away. Do not let those thoughts invade. You don't have to let those thoughts invade. Banish them. Right? No. I'm not going to go into the tyranny of what if I'd have done something differently. It's impossible to do something differently. It's done. Do not replay the tyranny of what if or if only. Yeah. So, I know that there's a certain firmness in saying that, but that's what you need, firmness. Do not take your mind or let your mind take you down that mind road of imagining what you should have or could have done differently, right? On the one hand, right, that's with the past, and then the imagining what might be or how could be the outcomes in the future. Both are a tyranny. So it's excellent that you can calm your nervous system for a while, and then you work with that. You work with establishing gentleness, simplicity, right? Go slowly and gently. Those two things, I know they sound simple, but they're absolutely vital. Just go slowly and gently. Slowly means slow enough to stay with yourself. So you notice when the tyranny of that habit, right, of creating drama around the past and around the future arise. And when you do notice that you've gone that way, stop. Cut off the mind road. Maybe you've already gone all the way down one of those roads for 20 minutes. Stop. Stop. Switch channels. Get up and move. Go and make a cup of tea. Go outside and breathe the air. Take a shower. I don't know. Do something to just switch channels, right? So that you get into the habit of generating the confidence that you can direct your attention and not be pulled and pushed around by the habits, tyrannical habits of replaying unhelpfully, as if the replay could make a difference. or rehearsing, rehearsing catastrophe. And that's what fear is. So I really feel for you with all of that, and I hope that my firmness doesn't come across in any way as or me being a little emphatic doesn't come across in any way as critical. Far from it. It's rather an invitation to sort of step into that, something that might feel a little ferocious, but hey, ferocious can be a very good protection against the tyranny of habits pulling us in those directions. All right, friends, please go slowly and gently, through the day. Thanks for all your practice and presence and questions. I know I didn't get to them again, but it's like that. Do what we can. Come back tomorrow. Thank you.